Have you ever felt like you're running on a treadmill? You're putting in all this effort, but you're just not going anywhere? It's a really common human feeling, right? To get stuck in a job or a relationship or even just a way of thinking that you know isn't working for you anymore. So today, we're going to dive into the psychology of why we get stuck and maybe, just maybe, figure out how we can get unstuck. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at the mental traps that keep us hooked on bad decisions. Then we'll dig into the psychological blueprint that gets formed way back in our childhood. After that, we'll see how our everyday behaviors are learned, look at the biological reasons change gets harder, and then we'll finish up with this really powerful idea: growth through unlearning. So let's jump right into part 1, the commitment trap. This is all about that really strong and, let's be honest, often totally irrational feeling that makes it so hard to walk away from something we've already poured our time or money or heart into. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? Maybe it was that project at work that was just tanking, or a stock that kept on dropping. Or hey, maybe it was just waiting for a bus that was clearly never ever going to show up. You know in your gut you should cut your losses and move on, but something just holds you there. So why is that? Well, psychology has a name for it, of course. It's called escalation of commitment. You might know it as the sunk cost fallacy. It's that little voice in your head going, "But I've already put so much into this, I can't quit now." We let these past investments that we can never get back steer our future, and we end up just throwing good money or time or energy right after the bad. And this trap isn't just about our small personal decisions. The stakes can get incredibly high. Just think about this quote. Back in 1965, a man named George Ball warned President Johnson against getting deeper into the Vietnam War. He basically predicted that once we've committed so many troops and resources, it becomes almost impossible to pull out without feeling this sense of national humiliation, even if things are going badly. It is a really chilling, real-world example of this exact trap playing out. But this whole tendency to get stuck, it isn't just about one single mental glitch. To really get it, we've got to go deeper. We have to look at the very blueprint of our personality, which, believe it or not, gets drawn up when we're just kids. And that brings us to our second section. So the psychologist Erik Erikson had a fascinating way of looking at this. He suggested our lives unfold in 8 stages, and in each one, we face a big conflict we have to resolve. If we get through it successfully, we build a healthy personality. But if we don't, we can end up carrying those unresolved feelings with us, sometimes for the rest of our lives. Let's just take the very first stage, trust versus mistrust. It happens when you're an infant. If your caregivers are there for you, feeding you, comforting you, you learn that the world is a pretty safe and reliable place. You develop trust. But if they're not, you might grow up with a deep-seated fear and mistrust that can color how you see everything. It's that fundamental. Sigmund Freud had a similar idea, and he called it fixation. He thought that if we don't properly resolve these conflicts in our childhood, we can literally get stuck in that stage. So, for example, someone who gets fixated in a very early dependent stage might become an adult who is incredibly needy, always looking for that comfort they feel like they missed. It just goes to show how these really early experiences can create patterns we're still wrestling with decades later. Okay, so we've got this deep psychological blueprint from childhood, but, that's not the whole story. Our behavior is also being constantly shaped from the outside by our environment through learning and conditioning. I'm sure you've heard of Pavlov's dogs, right? It's the classic example of what's called classical conditioning. It's simple. A dog drools when it sees food. That's just a natural reflex. But if you ring a bell every single time right before you give it the food, eventually the dog's brain connects the bell with the food. And soon enough, you can just ring the bell and the dog starts salivating. A totally new response has been learned. Then this guy, John B. Watson, he took that idea and just ran with it. He was a behaviorist, and he basically argued that everything we do, how we talk, our habits, even really complex emotions like fear, is just a conditioned response, that we're simply reacting to triggers in our environment that we've learned to associate with certain outcomes. And then came B.F. Skinner, who added another crucial piece to the puzzle with something called operant conditioning. He used his famous Skinner box to show that if a behavior gets a reward, we're more likely to do it again. If it gets a punishment, we're less likely.
So when you put it all together, you realize that so many of our ingrained habits, the very things we feel stuck in, aren't just choices we make. They are deeply, deeply learned responses that have been reinforced for years. So if our patterns are so deeply learned, why can't we just unlearn them? Just decide to be different? Well, it turns out part of the answer has to do with our own biology. As we get older, our brain literally, physically makes it harder to change.
Take a look at this number, 5%. What do you think that could possibly mean in this context? Just 5%. Well, that is the amount your brain's volume can actually decrease every single decade after you turn 40. And that's not just some random fact. It has real consequences. It can affect how fast we process information, how well we make new memories, and, this is the big one, our ability to change those established patterns and get ourselves unstuck. And when you look under the hood, you can see why. Our memory for specific events can start to fade. The genes that help our brain literally rewire itself, what scientists call synaptic plasticity, they become less active. Our brain's hardware starts to wear down a bit. All of this makes our existing habits and ways of thinking feel like these deep, comfortable grooves that are just incredibly difficult to climb out of. Now, I know that all sounds a little bleak, but I promise it's not the end of the story. Because the final piece of this puzzle is honestly the most empowering one. It's this idea of growth, not by learning more stuff, but by unlearning. I absolutely love this analogy. Think about your ego, your sense of who you are, as a closet that is just jam-packed with stuff. There is no way you can fit any new clothes in there, right? Not unless you're willing to go through and toss out the old things that just don't fit anymore. And that's what this is really all about. Starting a true new chapter, whether it's a new career, a new relationship, a new version of you. It isn't just about adding new skills or information. It's about the conscious and sometimes difficult act of unlearning and letting go of what no longer serves you. That word, evicting, it's so powerful, isn't it? It's not passive, it's active. It means you have to take a really honest look at the beliefs and the habits that got you here, and have the guts to admit that they might not be what you need to get you where you want to go next. It is all about making space. So I'll leave you with this thought. Getting unstuck isn't about becoming a totally different person. It's about shedding the layers of you that are holding you back. It's a process of unlearning, of making room, of rewriting your own code. The only question left is, are you ready to let go of who you were for who you're meant to be?